Glad that you're joining us. Please go right ahead with your question.
Okay, my question is about the TOD deed, a transfer on death deed.
Okay.
And I just found out about that. I have two friends, and both of them are very ill, and one has a deed given to her grandchildren. My second question, one is of age 18, the other two grandchildren are underage, and she just had it made out by a notary. So I want to ask about that question. Then I want to know about the TOD, transfer on death deed.
Well, let's talk about these real estate transfers that are made in anticipation of death. The most common one is called a joint tenancy with right of survivorship. So my wife and I own property. It's joint tenancy with right of survivorship. If one of us dies, the other one gets all the property, 100% of it, without going to probate court, without probating a will, and it's part of the deed. Now, you wouldn't do that if you, say, co-owned a commercial building with a business partner. You don't do it that way, and that's called something else. It's called a tenancy in common, if you like the legalese of it, but that's what they call them. But that's done, the joint tenancy with right of survivorship is done not just by married couples, but couples who are together, and it's done by brothers and sisters sometimes. There are all kinds of reasons to do that. And I've done plenty of those, and sometimes it's called a cheap man's will, because if your house is your major asset, then that's exactly what you want, is you want to have that deed that transfers the property to someone else at death. Now, there is a hitch there you got to be a little worried about, and that is that if, say, you are elderly and you have no debt, and then you decide you're going to have a joint tenancy with right of survivorship with your son, and your son has debt, and then he has some bad luck, and all of a sudden creditors are coming after his property, then you can end up with his creditors coming after your house. So it's the cheapest way to do that, but it has a risk involved. One thing that I recommend, not for everybody, but a revocable trust is where you put your property in a trust, and the trust controls the property, or you own the property, there's a trustee. You can be trustee of your own trust just to control your property. But the difference is this: when you die, you have a successor trustee, could be your son, and then your son, under the rules of the trust, he distributes it to your 3 children, or distributes it to the son who already lives in the house, or whatever you're doing. But trusts work that way. There's a lot into that that's beyond what we can discuss shortly, but more than glad to discuss it. So I hope I answered your question.
And she asked about the TOD deed.
I have not worked with the TOD. And so my understanding, it sounds a lot like joint tenancy with right of survivorship. The legislature might have just tweaked that in some way, and I'll admit that I have not done one.
James, it sounds like Donna's friend probably ought to see a lawyer rather than try to do this.
Agreed. Let's talk about that briefly. A lot of people think you can go on the internet and pull off a deed, but every clerk at every court knows when you do that, because those wills and deeds, they look like they're made by somebody in Lawyer Central in Sacramento or something. And then 2, they don't tell you that if you don't have, say, 2 witnesses and a notary, you're going to have some type of hearing to prove that that will anyway. So yeah, you think you got a will, but then you got to go to court to prove that it's really a will.
So don't do that.
Right. Well, the notarization, most people don't understand this. The notarization on a deed or a will, and then the witness signatures in some cases are required. Those things get you into the fast lane for recording things and for probating things.
Right.
And if you don't have those notary signatures, then you just have a piece of paper with a signature on it. And the probate judge is going to give it a lot of scrutiny versus the probate judge say, sure, come on in.
That's all good to know.
Advice.
Thank you so
Good
much.
advice.
Thank you so much.